Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. Today we will be talking about scientific proof of the existence of God. But it is not just because I want to give you a science talk, and not even that I want to prove to you that science can prove that God exists. Although I do think the fact that a scientific proof exists of the existence of God is possibly one of the, or possibly the most significant scientific finding of all time. But the real purpose of this is, as I had mentioned yesterday, is that our Ummah has been attacked by a very powerful enemy. And that very powerful enemy is secular materialism. And remember, secular meaning the world without God, and materialism meaning that the physical existence is made up of little bits of stuff moved around by fixed laws. And we want to show how there is no logical, reasonable, or scientific basis for secular materialism. Once secular materialism is destroyed as a philosophy and as a way of looking at the world and understanding the world, then we can focus on the true way of understanding the world, which is the way Allah has told us to look at the world. And we will find out that what we are told in Islam is essentially exactly the real view of the world. Interestingly, secular materialism, one of the reasons it was so successful was because it seemed so obviously right. And a spiritual, God-centered worldview, I don't mean to be rude saying this, but does not seem so logically right. You know, basically, it has been sustained for thousands of years through faith. And the word faith means belief without truth, belief based on trust without proof. And that is fine until you end up with a world that everything that people believe needs to be based on verifiable fact. At which time faith starts to become weak. And so we send our young Muslims, brothers and sisters, out into a world, you know, and when they're in the home, they learn by faith and they believe, and they go out, and then all of a sudden they are hit by knowledge and logic that seems really obviously true. I mean, although in a future talk, probably the next talk after this one, I will be talking about why evolution is wrong and what the right answer is. But evolution is not a stupid idea. Evolution is a very reasonable idea, given the data that we had to look at. I mean, it was really quite a brilliant idea. It just happened to be wrong, and now provably wrong. So secular materialism had a lot going for it. So a big part of this, the importance of this proof of the existence of God, has to do with the fact that its importance, it has two levels of importance. One, for those of us who already have faith, it really doesn't add much. We're not going to, in other words, I don't, well, I wouldn't say myself, I would say most people, because I came to know God through knowledge rather than faith. But for people who have faith, the knowledge is not going to add much to their faith in God. But it is certainly going to provide an armor against anyone who wants to come up and try and attack your faith. I want to talk first a little bit about the development of secular materialism, which basically arose with Sir Isaac Newton's work about roughly 400 or so years ago, when science before that time was really science of just human ideas. It was not based on any rigorous type of study. And so one of the arguments against science today that people want to use, you know, like, because I have been on the side of atheism, I know well the arguments of atheism. So some of the arguments of atheism, I mean, some of the things that atheists have to deal with is that people who are religious and who believe in God want to say, like you come up with a theory, like theory of evolution, and want to argue against it on such basis as, well, it's just a theory, meaning a theory is something that is not necessarily true. But you see, to an atheistic scientist, this is very naive thinking. I mean, theory is a word we use in science because the nature of science, the scientific method and philosophy itself, says that science does not prove anything true. Science does not prove things true. So, to argue, I mean, essentially all people are saying, to say, well, it is just a theory, all they are really saying is what the scientists already know. It is just a theory, yes, but gravity is just a theory. But we don't step off cliffs to see whether the theory is right or not. We feel quite sure that it is right. So those kind of arguments come up. But the clear logic of secular materialism comes from, see, secular materialism started as just some formula to allow us to understand the nature of the physical existence. And then philosophies and ways of life and a whole view of science and a whole world view ended up coming from that. But it came from some very simple things. Among these simple things some of them are so simple that we just take them as absolute givens. So you are traveling in this direction in a car, and you are going going 40 kilometers per hour, and you throw something. You throw a ball forward from this car. At 30 kilometers per hour. Now, this is the kind of simple thing that when I mean, to us today it seems like no problem at all. But probably 400 years ago, it wasn't really obvious that if you were going at a certain, well, I know it wasn't obvious actually until Newton's theories came along. Actually, the fact that we add these, in school you learn to add velocities, right? And so if you're going in a car 40 kilometers an hour and you throw a ball forward 30 kilometers an hour, how fast is it going? Right? So we say, now that seems so simple and obvious, it's impossible it could not be true. I mean, it seems impossible it could not be true. Before the time of Newton, nobody actually realized this. That when you are going at a certain speed and you throw something ahead, they didn't know that you could add those two speeds. I mean, it's actually one of the implications of one of Newton's formulae that allows us to do this. And this has become so much a part of everyday mathematics and everyday life, we just absolutely, totally accept it, right? And here's where I want to say that this is why secular materialism is so very dangerous, because it seems so obviously true, and it is just everywhere. It is what the word ubiquitous means. Everywhere you look, you find it. So every day in our lives, simple things that we do. We take a math class, we learn secular materialism. Nobody says you're learning secular materialism, but the ideas are teaching you to view the world from the perspective of secular materialism. Now, early in the 20th century, Einstein came along with two theories of relativity, a general theory of relativity and a special theory of relativity. One of this isn't about the proof of the existence of God yet. I mean, it'll take a while. I want to have a lead into this. But I want to show how his theories totally destroyed the concept of secular materialism. Einstein said that, in his special theory of relativity, that velocities are not absolute, that velocities depend on the position and the velocity of the observer. In other words, they are not independent. There is no such thing as an independent 40 kilometers per hour and an independent 30 kilometers per hour. These are not two things. They are not actual things. So since they are not actual things, you cannot actually add them because they are not actual things. What is it? I'm not going to do the formula. I wish I could do the formula. I should relearn it because it is really impressive and it's simple enough so I could show everybody if I could remember it. But I haven't done the actual formula for so long that I can't remember it. But at least I can tell you this, that when you have a car traveling 40 kilometers an hour and you throw a ball forward 30 kilometers an hour, the answer is, which way does the symbol go for less than? This way or that way? This way? Yes. So, according to Einstein's special theory of relativity, you add 40 kilometers an hour and 30 kilometers an hour, and you get something less than 70 kilometers an hour. And that is reality. This is not reality. The way Allah has made the world is this way, not that way. But the difference here at 70 kilometers an hour, it may be that or something. So close that our measuring instruments, we can't even measure really, I mean, maybe there are some instruments, but certainly for things like cars and balls, we don't have instruments to measure that difference. But that difference is real. And it is important that it is real in that this answer is just not true. It is a false perception of reality. And you remember what I said yesterday about insanity, right? If you have a false view of reality, if your view of reality is sufficiently far from the truth, you constitute a danger to yourself and to others. So it doesn't really matter here whether it's 70 or this. That's not going to constitute a danger to ourselves or to others. But this one thing itself represents the totality of secular materialism. Absolutely every part of secular materialism is based on a false hypothesis, that the world is as it looks like it is. And the world just isn't as it looks like it is. So Newton and various physicists after him have come up with all sorts of theories and formula to perceive the world as it looks. But the reality is that it isn't. And to show you, I mean, here the difference is something we can say, oh, well, so what? That means nothing. But say, for instance, we have and we have speed of light, which is roughly 300,000 kilometers per second. And so we have spaceship, and it's going 0.9 the speed of light. And from this spaceship, in the front of it, they have a big light, and they shine the light out from the front of the spaceship. And light travels at this speed. So if you turn on a flashlight, that light goes to the wall. Well, it would if it was in a vacuum. In a vacuum, that's this speed in a vacuum, not in the air. But if you're in a vacuum and you turned on a flashlight, the light would go from the flashlight to the wall at 300,000 kilometers per second. So you're going in the spaceship here at 0.9. And that light goes at 0.1 speed of light. According to Newton, you add those two, you get well, there's no such thing as 1.9 the speed of light, because the absolute speed of light, the absolute speed that is available is 1. So according to Einstein, equals 1 speed of light. So the only reason that secular materialism seems to be the correct way, seems to be correct in the world, is because basically we move very slowly. If we moved very fast, we would see huge differences. So you can see when you get up near the speed of light, the difference between the two is 0.9 the speed of light, which is huge. As opposed to the speeds of 30 and 40 kilometers per hour, the difference is like 1 millionth or less of a kilometer per hour. So just this simple thing here actually totally destroys, when Einstein came up with his special theory of relativity, people didn't know this for a long time, but this totally destroys any basis for secular materialism. And then you could go, I just picked one thing, but you could go through thing after thing and compare them to what would be the implications of from Einstein's special or general theories of relativity compared to the Newtonian formula, and every time you will see a difference. And Einstein's formula proved mathematically and experimentally to be true. Newton's formulas proved to be experimentally not true and mathematically not true. So therefore, secular materialism is essentially dead. Just because it's dead, though, that doesn't mean it's going to go quickly. It is so ingrained. I notice when I give talks, I say things that are based on secular materialistic ideas. It's virtually impossible for me to give a talk without saying things that are based on concepts of secular materialism. They are so deeply ingrained in our consciousness. So we have to start weeding them out. But it isn't so important that we get them all out quickly. The thing that is so important is that we know that no longer are the implications of secular materialism valid. As I pointed out yesterday with the French philosopher Rousseau, who made the point that, I won't belabor the point, but eventually ended up saying, so with these new ideas of science, which are essentially secular materialism, therefore why do we need God? honestly, if secular materialism was true, it would be a very, very strong argument against the existence of God. So, I mean, we are extremely thankful that Allah in His mercy has made them not to be true. Okay, so that's just one thing. I just wanted to show you how easy it is, given new knowledge, to destroy the whole concept of secular materialism. My particular work I had a very unusual background in theoretical physics. I have never studied theoretical physics formally. I spent 13 and a half years studying psychology at university, and actually never took a physics class. But I was trained in the U.S. military in nuclear electronics, and then while I was an undergraduate, those first 4 years where I didn't take a physics class, I actually worked 20 hours a week in at the time, probably the foremost theoretical physics laboratory in the world. We were doing work into black holes, neutrinos, and cosmic rays, and we had the #1 detector in the world. And we had Nobel Prize winners from all over the world coming and staying for a few weeks and working with us. And so not only did I spend 4 years sharing an office with half a dozen PhD students in theoretical physics, and have a very close friend who was the head of the cosmic ray physics program. But I also had opportunities to speak with several Nobel Prize winners, such as Murray Gell-Mann, who developed the quark theory, and I think C.N. Yang, and an Italian man, I can't remember his name now. And because I was not a physicist, actually, I would, to be honest, I would be a physicist, right? I actually ended up going to the University of Utah to work in the physics, in the theoretical physics laboratory, because I had some specific skills about designing and building radiation detection equipment. And they really badly wanted me to go into physics. But there was a reality which I had to face, which is my math is not that good. So my math wasn't good enough for physics. My math was plenty good enough for psychology. The hardest part of math, psychology, math and psychology is statistics. And my math was plenty good for statistics, but not nearly good enough for physics. Which put me in the position then, when I am having opportunities to meet all of these high-level physicists, that I have to, and they have to, if we want to converse about physics, we have to use normal language. And they used to say to me over and over, I can't say it to you in English. I can only show it to you in a formula. And I say to them, but if you show it to me in a formula, it will mean nothing to me. So if you say it to me very badly in English, it will mean more to me than if you show me in a formula. And this went on for years. And by the way, the man who was the head of the theoretical physics lab, he had a small ranch. And on the weekends, I used to go out and work on his ranch with him. And we would, break horses and build corrals and dig irrigation ditches together. And all the time, we would be discussing these kind of things, which I will be discussing today in the scientific proofs of the existence of God. And so that formed the basis of my education in theoretical physics. And then, of course, I read books on physics until probably about 10 or 15 years ago, when it seemed like, in the 60s and 70s, and by the end of the 70s, it was pretty much over. Were like no end of big, exciting new discoveries in physics. You know, in psychology too. And all of a sudden things have died down. And there are not, you know, we don't live in a world where we are, you know, confronted with things like, I mean, when I was in high school, there was no Big Bang Theory. You know, come along to Big Bang Theory is one of the most exciting things that ever happened in physics. So, anyway, that is a little bit of my history of what I know about physics. So don't expect me to be a physicist in the normal sense. Although when I did give a series of I think 4 or 5 3-hour talks out at MINT, the Malaysian Institute for Nuclear Technology, where I was worried that my knowledge might not be nearly sufficient. The people out there complained that because I gave the talk at the highest level I could out there, they complained that it was too hard, which was kind of rewarding. Anyway, so with now the death of secular materialism, we'll talk a little bit about proofs of the existence of God. Before I get to the proof of the existence of God based on Einstein's special theory of relativity, I just want to give mention to something else that has existed for a very long time. And there have been many logical arguments for the existence of God. Only one of them has sustained itself over time. And really, if you look back on them, you know, if you look at the early logical arguments, mainly done by Catholic priests who, you know, St. Anselm and St. I'm not very good at the name of Catholic saints, but they were philosophers also and logicians. And many of their theories we look today and we say, oh, well, how naive, you know, that couldn't come close to proving anything. But one is a very, very powerful one. And it's called the watchmaker argument, where if I show you my watch and I say to you, what do you think is the reality? Did stuff just fly around from the universe and all of a sudden make up my watch? Or was my watch made by a watchmaker? Well, of course you're going to say my watch was made by a watchmaker. The stuff, the matter of the universe, just didn't end up being my watch. I mean, it's clear, right? This is the basis of the watchmaker argument. The argument then goes, therefore, we look at the universe, which we now know in the known universe has approximately 10,000 billion star systems, just in the known universe. That's only a tiny part of the larger universe. And everything works, you know, more perfectly than my watch does. And so, if we hypothesize that there must be a watchmaker to make something as complex as my watch, must we not logically postulate or propose a universe maker to create something as logically, as physically complex as the universe? So that's called the watchmaker argument. And it had never been refuted until early in the 20th century. Probably the greatest philosopher of the 20th century, Bertrand Russell, I think in about the 1930s, thought that he came up with a rejoinder or a successful answer to that argument. And what he thought that answer was to say that, yes, I am in agreement. Your watch didn't just come together. The stuff of the universe did not just come together to make your watch. Your watch was made by a watchmaker. But your watchmaker was made by watchmaker parents. And the watchmaker parents were made by watchmaker grandparents. And the watchmaker grandparents were made by watchmaker great-grandparents. So we have here an infinite regression. And we never get to the end or the origin of the maker of the watch. It just goes on forever. So he said the same thing is true. If you want to postulate a God who made a universe, you have to postulate a God maker. And if you postulate a God maker, you have to then say, and then who is the God maker of the God maker, and the God maker of the God maker of the God maker. in infinite regression. Because Bertrand Russell came up with these theories in the 1930s, he was not familiar with what I'll be talking about in a couple of minutes. One of the astounding implications of Einstein's general theory of relativity, that the universe had a beginning, and that beginning was in nothingness. And that nothingness does not mean just empty space out there waiting to be filled by a universe. That nothingness means no space and no time and no matter. So therefore, since nobody's religion seems to say that God exists in the universe, that God exists outside of space and time, that is actually one of the sort of givens about God, that the argument for the watchmaker and his parents and his grandparents and that, they are all involved in a flow of time. So in a flow of time, you have causality. You had to have somebody cause the watchmaker, somebody cause the watchmaker's parents. But when you are not outside of time, there is no causality. Causality only exists when there is a flow of time. So his argument against the, or argument that there would be necessary if there was a God to have a God maker, and if there was a God maker, it was necessary to have a maker of the God maker, falls apart because it requires an existence in causality. So that remains still a very powerful argument for the existence of God. But I would say it would be very unlikely to convince an atheist. You know, I mean, when I was an atheist, I knew that. I studied that argument in school, and I just said, yeah, so what? You know, nice argument, but I don't feel anything at all like that being a proof of the existence of God. But it is an interesting thing that it is a logical argument that has never been disproven. So next, I don't really need to erase this for this, but it has to be erased anyway. Next, I want to tell you not the final scientific proof of the existence of God, but I want to tell you what I would call an indirect proof of the existence of God that comes from science. And it has to do with Einstein's general theory of relativity. When Einstein came along with his general theory of relativity, he realized one of the implications of his formula was that if his formula were correct, the universe was expanding. Now, you might think, here's Einstein, a man who came up with some of the most brilliant, innovative ideas that have ever been generated in science. Why would he mind that his theory had an implication that the universe was expanding? But he was absolutely shocked by this finding. He was so shocked by this finding that he felt it necessary to falsify his formula to take that implication out. He added, I don't know exactly how he did it because this part is more complicated than I can understand, but I do know that he put what's called a constant into his formula that took out the implication that the universe was expanding, because it was just way too shocking. Now, why would it be shocking for Einstein to have his theory say the universe was expanding? The reason is because if the universe is expanding in the future, this means as you go back in the past, the universe got smaller. And if you go back far enough in the past, therefore, you reach the point where the universe has no size, meaning it had a moment of creation. And he did not, as a scientist, want to, certainly back then, even today, scientists, if their work seems to lean a little bit towards implications that maybe God exists or anything like that, they'll make apologies in their books. I've seen apologies in books of physicists and biologists that their work sounds a little bit like proof of religious belief, but they say that it's not. It's, we keep our science totally separate from religion. But anyway, this was the reason why Einstein felt it necessary to put this implication in, to say that the universe was not expanding. Now, interestingly, as far as I have been able to tell, the idea of an expanding universe, in various religions and various philosophies and various scientific theories, almost everything had been proposed. But I have not actually been able to find anywhere that proposed an expanding universe, except for one place, in the Quran, where Allah tells us that I am expanding the universe with my power. 1400 years ago, 1420, around 1400 years ago, Allah tells us that I am expanding the universe with my power. Not much has ever been said about that by the scholars, because it was an idea that sort of just didn't exist in human thought. There were basically two theories to the nature of the universe. Either the universe had always been just as it is now, or God created the universe just as it is now. The idea of starting in nothing and expanding to be what it is now through a series of stages was not one of the theories that had been proposed. So we then have not too long after Einstein's theories came out that I won't go into all of them. I'll just mention one briefly. It's called, Fred Hubble came up with a concept called redshift, where he noticed that the further away the stars are from us, the light from them tends to shift to the red, which, without going into detail, it just means that they are moving faster and faster away from us the further you get from us, which is also a proof of the expanding universe. There's a couple of other proofs, but another one came along. And it became just a generally accepted knowledge that the universe was expanding, about which point Einstein made a public apology for having lied in his formula, and he said this was the only unethical thing he had ever done scientifically in his life, and he apologized. And so we then started accepting that the universe was expanding. And then, I don't know how long after that, but not real quickly after that, because when I was in high school in the around 1960, I don't know, it's late 50s and early 60s, I don't remember exactly what year, but it was the 50th anniversary of one of Einstein's special theories of relativity. And I remember reading in the newspaper an article saying, well, now 50 years after Einstein discovered the theory of relativity, it is so complex that there are still only half a dozen scientists in the whole world who understand it. So the implications did not become widely known very quickly. And we have people who, such as Marx's friend Engels, who wrote a book on materialism and imperial criticism, where he was asked, he said he is often asked, do these new theories in physics, referring to Einstein's special theories, general theory, his theories of relativity, do they have any implications for the concept of materialism? Because the materialism was very central to the communist view of the world. And he said, no, there's absolutely no link at all to these, between Einstein's work and the beliefs of the socialist beliefs in materialism. So it took really quite a while, and I don't remember exactly when the Big Bang theory first came along, although I do remember I was extremely excited. But interestingly, when the Big Bang theory first came along, The reason that it is called Big Bang is because after we reached a point, because it wasn't all of a sudden everybody agreed that the universe was expanding and so therefore had a beginning. You know, there was like a 20 or 30-year argument with, I think, Fred Hoyle, a famous astronomer and cosmologist, who held to what's called the steady state theory and said that the universe had always been like this, and new matter was coming into existence, but the universe had always been essentially like it is. So it took a long time, really, even after there had been scientific proof that the universe was expanding, and so therefore in the past had a beginning. It took quite a long time to accept that. When it became so universally accepted that there was nobody denying it, then scientists started trying to come up with an explanation of how it could happen, how there could be a beginning to the universe. And the first try ended up being called the Big Bang. And the name sticks. We know now it was not a Big Bang. I'll just mention that. But you can't really get away from that name. It was such an attractive name, the Big Bang. So, which implies a big explosion. And a big explosion implies that there was stuff there to explode. You don't have an explosion unless there is something there to explode. So the original postulation or the original proposal by scientists was that all of the stuff in the whole universe was at one point all together in what some of them termed the primeval atom. And then it couldn't exist with all that heat and pressure, and so exploded outwards and became all of this. Nobody at that point asking the question, where did all that stuff come from? That theory prevailed and is still stuck in many people's minds today. I believe one of the reasons that theory was proposed because at that time there was enough scientific knowledge to know that the universe began as a singularity. A singularity is a point with no dimension. A point so small it has no size at all. So the concept of all the stuff in the universe existing, you know, not just in one really big lump, but at a point that had no dimension at all is very illogical and probably quite impossible. So I think that this original theory was proposed because scientists did not want to have to deal with the fact that the universe really did begin from nothing, from absolute nothingness. And they also, as their theories told them, that the universe began not from just empty space sitting there waiting to be filled with matter, and not with time just going on waiting until some matter came along at this singularity to fill space. Before this singularity, I'm misusing the word before, but when the singularity appeared, until the singularity appeared, there was no space, no time, and no matter. So there was absolute nothingness. The concept of a universe of which we know 10,000 billion stars worth, and we have logical proof that the universe is many, many, many times larger than that. Was of course very hard to deal with, thinking that it came from absolute nothing. Now here is where I'm saying we have come to then a indirect proof of the existence of God. The fact that the universe exists with 10,000 billion stars plus many times that more that we can't see for various reasons of physics, and started from total nothingness, no time, no space, and no matter, at a point with no dimension, total nothingness. I ask any of you to propose an idea other than a being such as God, who might be the creator of something like that, a universe of 10,000 billion stars plus, from absolute nothingness at a point with no dimension. So just logic, not logically, but as an indirect proof. Because there seems to be no other possible answer other than a being who is postulated to have the characteristics of God who could do such a thing. This then becomes, I would say, a fairly strong indirect proof of the existence of God. So now we have two proofs of the existence of God. We have the logical one, the watchmaker argument, and we have the indirect proof of the existence of God, in that something now exists that doesn't seem like it could have existed any other way because it started in absolute nothingness, and there seems to be no possible alternative but God. So this is an indirect proof. By the way, since I want to just an interesting thing. I keep saying that the universe is much bigger than 10,000 billion stars. By the way, that number is, when you see it, it is really quite nice to see. I say 10,000 billion, that's just a word. But when you see what the actual number is, right? In our known universe, approximately 10,000 billion stars. And we get that very simply by saying the size of an average universe is 100 billion stars, and the estimate is that in the universe that we can see, and we can only see a certain amount of the universe because of the fact that the universe is expanding, there are approximately 100 billion galaxies, so you just multiply 100 billion times 100 billion and you get this number. Now, I mean, this is really a lot of stars, right? Now, they used to say this was the universe, and scientists used to say, because obviously I was very interested in the question, well, look, if there's, they'd say, well, you can't see further than that. They'd say there's a thing called the light horizon, because the universe is expanding, and the further away you get, faster the universe is expanding, and you get far enough away, which is somewhere around maybe 14 to 15 or so billion light years away, and the space is expanding, right? I said nothing can go through space. I said nothing can go faster than the speed of light. It's not actually true. Nothing can go through space faster than the speed of light. There is no limit on how fast space can expand. So you get out 15 or so billion light years, and space, because it is expanding so fast that if there is a star that is 16 billion light years away, and its light starts toward us at the speed of light, but it's moving away from us at greater than the speed of light, that light never gets here. So that's why there's what they call a light horizon. So it doesn't matter, we get bigger telescopes, doesn't matter what, we're not going to see beyond that. So scientists used to, so I used to say, well, what? I mean, is there an edge? What's there? They said, no, there's no edge. I said, well, are there more stars? They said, no, we can't say there's more stars. It's impossible to know because we can't observe it. But Einstein used to like to do what he called thought experiments, because Einstein realized that there are things we would like to know. And some of these things we would like to know, we're never going to be able to do an experiment to prove them, such as this. I mean, in the foreseeable future, and maybe forever, we're never going to be able to see past the light horizon because of the nature of the speed of light. But there is a very simple, so Einstein said, well, for some of these things, you can actually do thought experiments. And the thought experiment can give you data just as accurate as a real experiment can give you. The only difference is it's not really data, it's just an idea. But it's such a powerful, logical idea that you have to accept it. So, we are here. Okay, so here is our light horizon. Now, if I am here and I look in this direction, and I look to here, I see 15 billion years, and I see the edge of the universe being 15 billion light years away. If I turn around and I look this way, 15 billion light years to here. So the thought experiment says this: since this is me looking this way and that way, what about, because theoretically there can be life on other planets, so out here at our light horizon, there is a star like ours, and it has planets around it, and it has people, and you have somebody, and he is right here. He is looking at you, and you are at his light horizon. But if he turns around, he looks this way, he sees 15 billion light years. And every direction you go here, that is the case. And here is another guy, and he looks this way, right? So we can know that the actual universe itself is much, much larger. We can't tell from this how much larger, but it could be 1 trillion times larger. I mean, we just really don't know. So anyway, that's just a thought experiment to prove that the universe is much larger than this 10,000 billion stars, which seems like quite a lot anyway, which makes it even more likely, more unlikely, that all that stuff was together in one spot and exploded outwards. People tried then to also say, well, it wasn't actually, it never actually was a singularity. All the stuff that expand outwards stops expanding, contracts back in, becomes this great big ball of stuff until it becomes so much pressure and it can't contract anymore, and so it bounces back out. And they used to call it the bounce theory. Until somebody said, well, yes, but according to the laws of physics, on each bounce, like if I drop a ball and each bounce is lower and lower, each time it bounces, it's not going to bounce as far. And if the universe had been doing this and it was infinitely old, it would not be bouncing at all. So once again, it still had to have a beginning, even if it was bouncing. So now we get to almost to where I actually tell the scientific proof of the existence of God according to Einstein's theory of relativity. But one of the things that I want to say first is that Einstein never himself referred to his theory about light as special theory of relativity. Special theory of relativity having to do with light, general theory of relativity having to do with the special nature of gravity. Einstein called what we call his special theory of relativity about the special nature of light, he called it his absolutism theorem. And he called it the absolutism theorem because he said, in light, I have found the one thing in a relative universe that is absolute. Now, when I used to talk with these physicists, because my interests were not so much in the physics itself, but in the implications of the physics, I used to always be asking the question, what does it mean if that is the case? Like I would say to myself, if somebody says the speed of light is an absolute, nothing can move through space faster than the speed of light. I didn't even ask the question why. That's really a question of physics. Why can it not move faster? I used to always be interested in the question, what does it mean that it cannot? And, excuse me for just a second. That the special nature of light is really special. And the reason, because I said to myself, well, what does it mean that light is the only absolute in the relative universe? And I ended up with a conclusion that the only way that light can be the only absolute in a relative universe is for light to not actually exist in the relative universe. The very nature of a relative universe is that everything in the relative universe is relative. And so if you find an absolute, you are actually seeing something that does not exist in the physical universe. Now it certainly seems to us, if I go over there and flip a switch, a light will come on, right? So we say, well, the light's right here in the room. But when we are talking about light, we have to talk about what mathematically and theoretically has been proven about the nature of light. And so what I want to say is light does not exist in the physical universe. And for something to exist in the physical universe, I would say, and I think physicists say this also, it has to have three characteristics: mass, volume, so it has to have some mass, and sorry I can't give you a good definition of mass. Mass is very hard to define, but mass is something like, a little bit like weight. Volume we all know, length times height times width, and involved in the flow of time. Basically, the way we see the universe from the past to now to the future. So, if I want to say light does not exist in the physical universe, I have to show it does not have any of these three characteristics. And here's where Einstein's special theory of relativity comes in. What does Einstein's special theory of relativity say about mass? Einstein's special theory of relativity says that as you approach the speed of light, mass increases. As you reach the speed of light, mass becomes infinite. So it doesn't matter whether you start with something with the mass of this marker or the mass of an electron, a tinier mass than an electron, if that exists. No matter how much mass you start with, you end up at the speed of, if it is traveling at the speed of light, its mass is infinite. Now, I think we all know that the mass of, I can just tell you with a thought experiment how the mass we do know experimentally, of course, that the mass of a photon, rest mass is 0, and mass at speed is 0. But logically also, the sun is sending out so many photons, trillions of trillions per second toward the Earth. Can you imagine if every one of these photons had infinite mass, what would happen to the Earth, right? Big smash. So we know that photons are not traveling around with any mass at all. So we have mass equal 0. On volume, what does Einstein's special theory of relativity say about volume? Say, for instance, this marker, we're being accelerated in this way towards the speed of light. Einstein's special theory of relativity says one of the three dimensions, it happens to be the one that is in line with the acceleration toward the speed of light, it is constantly decreasing. As it reaches the speed of light, that one dimension becomes 0. So you multiply the width times the height, and then multiply it times 0, and you get volume equals 0. What does Einstein's special theory of relativity say about the flow of time with light? As you approach the speed of light, time slows. As you reach the speed of light, time is 0. So, and by the way, I said Einstein's theory says this, that the time slows down as you speed up. You could say, well, what if Einstein's theory is wrong? I mean, you could say, well, it's just a theory. Well, many of the implications of his special theory of relativity have been experimented upon. This in particular has been. They take two atomic clocks, accurate to, I don't know, 1/1,000,000th of a second per month or something. I don't know exactly, but very, very close. And they keep one on Earth. And they put one up in a satellite. And the satellite is going maybe 90,000 miles an hour around the Earth. And the one on Earth is traveling about 24,000 miles an hour, which is the speed the Earth rotates at. And they leave the satellite up there for a month, and then they bring it down. And they compare the time on the two. And the one that was up there going faster, less time passed. Not only did less time pass, but it was accurate to what Einstein's special theory of relativity said would be the difference, to something like 8 or 10 decimal points. So, I mean, not only is his theory proven generally to be true, it's been proven to be true to the practically the limits of our technology to observe how correct it is. So we now have light that has no mass, has no volume, it occupies no volume of space, it has no mass in space, and is not involved in the flow of time in space. So therefore, this is why Einstein said it is the one absolute that he has found in a relative universe, because it has none of the characteristics of everything in the relative universe. But the way to have none of the characteristics of anything in the relative universe is actually not to be of the relative universe. Actually, light exists in, loosely put, a dimension other than ours. For those who are religiously inclined, I would say light exists in the spiritual world, as we all, of course, who are Muslim know. And we are very close to the first hour of the talk being up.